mayor's running a few minutes later. Just want to get her started. So I'll just stop our video on our side. That way you don't have to look at my mug.
All right, we are live on YouTube.
Okay, awesome. Welcome everybody to our Government and Economic Development Subcommittee, our final meeting. And I know we have people joining as we get started. We all introduced ourselves last time, so I don't think we need to go through that. So I'm just going to call the meeting to order and get right to what we're tasked with for today. We want to finish our discussion of reopening, benchmarks and guidelines for reopening government and economic development. And then we want to have a final discussion on final recommendations that we'll make to the mayor, that the mayor will then forward on to the governor. So the other thing that we want to do is kind of acknowledge that the governor has come out with a healthy at work guideline for government offices. And I don't know if everybody's had a chance to look at it. It is very detailed and pretty much speaks to a lot of the things that we talked about the last time we were on the line. And I would like to, Quinn and Craig, if you're on the line, and Quinn, that's probably something that we can submit to use for opening offices. It's pretty detailed and it's coming straight from the governor's office, and it seems like it makes sense. And then I want to acknowledge those that sent some videos and clips out of some things that were good sources. Bob Quick did send out to everybody a link to Commerce Lex Reopening Guide, which is a tool that Commerce Lex has put on their site that we're using. So we appreciate that, Bob. That's a very good tool. I think where we need to go now is really kind of have a couple of discussions. We've had some side discussions about kind of clarifying what we're really doing, what we're trying to accomplish specifically today. So I'd like for us to consider a couple of things. One is, what is it going to take to get back up and running? Is which, you know, what does business need from local government? And then what does our economic development strategy need from local government going forward? Kind of two questions. So the first one I'd like to pose and have a discussion around is, to get back up and running to some sort of capacity, what does business need from local government specifically? And
Ray, just real quick before we go any further, I have a statement that I've got to read.
Okay.
Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, state of emergency, and Governor Beshear's executive orders regarding social distancing, this meeting is being held via teleconference pursuant to Senate Bill 150 as signed by the governor on March 30th, 2020, and Attorney General Opinion 20-05, and in accordance with KRS 61.826, because it is not feasible to offer a physical location for the meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Quinn. So hopefully we use our 35 minutes or so productively, but I'd like to begin and open that discussion, and maybe Kevin and Bob can kind of chime in on exactly what do business need from local government at this time.
If you want, Kevin, I'll jump in first. And, you know, I think it's the same that everyone is looking for, whether you're government or business. But again, being the focus on this is how to get businesses up and running. Guidance, so communications of information times 100. We just got to keep communicating the healthy at work. We've got to keep communicating what we know from CDC. And then as questions arise, we've got to be able to tackle those questions quickly. And then as we're doing, like many of you in government are doing, we need to post those frequently asked questions to help guide others. But we have to have that sense of navigation to help companies, because not all businesses run the same, different sectors. There's just different needs, and then there's different levels of understanding. And so people are oftentimes looking for that guidance and navigation. As I said, communications, and then they're still seeking assistance to understand things like unemployment insurance. I talked with a small business this morning. They're on the phone constantly and can't get through, but they've got their workforce affected. They're trying to get workers to come back, and many of them have safety concerns, on and on and on. So there's a lot of different needs out there, but they have many questions about the different types of federal program assistance, financial relief. For those who got PPP as an example, who can't get their workforce to come back, what do they do? I mean, some of those are more general basic questions, and then there's others that become a little bit more complex. So just to kind of start with, if you're in business right now, you just need guidance, and then you need to know. Oh, and another item, PPE. So, we know of the challenges with the medical community, many non-for-profits. And a lot of these companies focused heavily on the need for their financial liquidity, their employee safety. They focused on a lot of things for those who are non-essential. Now they're starting up. One thing they didn't think a lot about was how to get PPE, the masks, it could be the shields, the temperature, thermometers, or temperature gauges, and all the different types of items that they would need. So there's a rush now to try to find that product. So having that availability, and then not competing with the medical communities and others that is well needed. So again, we're starting to hear a lot more questions about PPE and its supply and availability.
And Ray, Bob summed it up pretty good. I think when I think of this as what Tyrone, for example, and Jenna's team was doing when all this first started, if people couldn't figure out the SBA process or others specifically, he was the perfect conduit. He really dove in there and walked people through it. And to me, that's the kind of thing we need to be able to provide our businesses, is how do we communicate that, to borrow George's phrase, over communicate during this period with them.
Yeah.
And the small business development centers have done a pretty good job on the government programs. So, referrals to them is a good thing as well.
Just pointing people, I'll take a spinoff of George's comment. People sometimes just need to know where to go find that assistance still. And so we have many resources. Again, it's been a great public-private partnership between the city, the university, us, with the Small Business Development Center and other resources that are available. Tyrone is still working with companies for access loan needs. And again, probably more than anything else, handling individual calls with specific needs that small business has.
Well, I think we all can agree that, as George said, to over communicate is kind of the goal. And I look at the communication coming from the local government here, and then coming through the business community, and then working with our partners, even at the state and federal level, and having reps like Micah and Tatum on to kind of make sure that from a federal point of view, the things that we're having issues with it is being heard up in DC. So that's working pretty well. So I think one of the big takeaways from our group, obviously, is the biggest thing for businesses to be successful is to, as I keep telling companies, is to communicate with us when you don't or can't find PPE, or you feel like you're not being represented well by local government, or you're been given a runaround, or you're not, or things aren't transparent. Communicate to us so we can communicate that to the appropriate people too. So it may be opening up lines of communication almost two ways, up and down, and making people and companies feel safe to ask those questions. Before you go out of business, or if you find yourself in a struggle, you've got to try everything that you can and have access to as much information as you can to save your business and save jobs for your employees. And so what I'm finding is we've got to continue to over communicate, like you said, Bob, but we've got to, companies have to feel safe to call us so we can kind of guide them or point them in a direction of where they can get the additional information or additional funding or the PPE or whatever.
Also, let me add this. Our survey keeps evolving. We're getting ready to go out with another survey that probes more deeply into what some of the needs are. And then again, that's been how we've adjusted. We could see the different phases occurring, and that's how we've been able to kind of monitor that, but then to get information out as quickly as we could. So again, we'll keep evolving that survey as we go forward, but it's been very helpful to guide us at this point.
Ray, this is Andy, and Kevin, this may be a question for you. I think we've talked about this on some of the calls. Would a takeaway from this be as simple as somewhere on the city webpage, almost having a business resource page that it could direct them to the chamber, to the chamber's resource guide, or maybe just list in one place the contact information for the federal offices. Just something where it's again, we're just almost repeating information that's out there, but just being consistent in that messaging. And maybe from your all's perspective, some of the agencies that are most utilized by businesses, just directing, whether they're open, business as usual, if there is some kind of alternative way of communicating, that might be helpful. Just a suggestion.
That's a good point, Andy. In fact, Quinn and I did a call with some of our smaller businesses at 9, and this similar topic came up, and I went downstairs to talk with Craig Kamek, who manages the mayor's page on the city website, and he has kind of done the COVID-19 section of that page, which is, there's a huge banner connection to it right at the top of the screen. And it's broken out pretty much like you just described. And so you can go down and choose the link that you need. And it's updated. Much of it's done by, if it's something that's over in the governor's office, where the link updates as the governor's folks update their pages too. So we're trying to stay as current as we can, although this information changes on a constant flow. I think if anybody on this committee wants to look at that page, it would be helpful for us to know maybe what's not on there that would be useful. But yeah, I think, Andy, that's a good idea, because I think a central point for information, to the best you can, to kind of be the library, if you will, is important.
Do we have access to videos, or have the capacity to make some videos that kind of model the appropriate way to act once you're reopened? And then no one's talked about the enforcement side, and we had a conversation about it at UK a little bit, and carrot and stick came out. And so, focusing on, the rewards of doing it right versus, putting people in jail because they have too many people sitting at their table or something like that.
That was a thing that I was going to chime in on, is that, especially with communication, is that a lot of what we are getting is from a complaint of our constituents is the us versus them, versus we would rather be a partnership with them, and a lot of employers are feeling like it's a don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, and instead of looking for that are even apprehensive of getting that help and looking for that help because they feel like they're going to get 10 different things of what they cannot do, instead of the help of the partnership of what they can do, and let me help you through this, is because they're also worried of doing it wrong. And so that's as far as implementation and being what he just said, that's one of the things that we've been working on too. The other one other note that I'd written down too, as far as communication that I don't think we've talked about, is that no matter how much we put online and sites that we put on and information, they are still the ones that just pick up the phone and call. I mean, there's just so many people that you can put, it's overwhelming too, because everyone has a site. The city has a site, we have a site, McConnell has a site, the local chamber, the state, I mean, everyone has a site, and they all have so much information, and there's still such a huge group of people that are just going to pick up that phone. And the numbers at, even in Frankfurt, they have last I heard, I mean, it's a huge number of people answering their emails and things, and not as much answering phones. So there's a huge bottleneck of people that are just saying, you know, I've called, I've sat on the phone for 7 hours. So we got to remember the telecommunication too as a really big piece of the communication part that people are really frustrated with.
So, you know, Ray, in my mind, and Micah's right. I think we all try to watch phone messages here pretty close. It may be late in the afternoon by the time you get off Zoom meetings and everything else where you kind of do those follow-ups. What Bob and I were talking about is the real drive is, how do we communicate what information the business community needs to know about, okay, here are kind of the guidelines that are out there, or the source. And then B, how does Jenna's team, George, me, Daryl, as somebody that does economic development, how do we communicate with the business community on, here's a space, here's a spot for the resources, you can look at this website, or even be able to provide some of the answers like Tyrone's been doing, and helping people individually. I think that's the key focus of what this group, how do we communicate on both ends of this?
Yeah, I would agree. And Vice Mayor Kay, if you want to chime in, if you've been hearing stuff or hearing from the business community or anything of that nature, we'd love to hear your input on that, your thoughts on communication.
Well, I don't want to duck the local responsibility, because I think we have it, but I think it's fair to say that most of the bottlenecks have been at the state and federal level. I've not heard from my colleagues that we're getting a lot. We, as council members, are getting a lot of questions from businesses. What I hear more is about the local enforcement of social distancing and what the city is doing and not doing about that. And this is kind of a side note, I guess, because we're talking mostly about business and government, but our police are not enforcing social distancing in public spaces. They are only enforcing it if people are on our property. And, you know, an anecdote of one, I raised that question with the city, and I called in, and I thought that the police would go and at least suggest to people that they shouldn't congregate. But basically, if they're in public spaces, they're not doing that, and for better or worse. But on the business side, as I said, I think it's mostly going to the state and federal level, but I would kind of chime in on a lot of what's already been said. If the city can do more to coordinate information and to make sure that it's consistent, I think that would be helpful. And businesses have the biggest challenge. I mean, as an individual or as individuals, we can all make our own choices about where we go and how we go and what we do. And no one's going to make an issue about that. But businesses are really on the front line. And I think we all know that they want to open as soon as possible, and they want to do it in a safe way. And so I think all of the talk about messaging is correct. As much as possible, if that messaging can be consistent basically from federal, state, and local level, I think that's helpful. But the short story is, I think that we'll do what we can, but it's going to be a situation, I believe, of hit and miss. People are going to do things, not do things. They're going to be calling, they're going to be asking questions, and we'll just have to respond as best we can.
Okay. But that's a good point, Vice Mayor Kay. We appreciate it. Kevin, to your other thought, we have a lot of videos that we have shot here, and we've had a lot of Facebook and other things, initiatives that we've done. Some of them may be updated, but we have a pretty decent repository of Q&As and all kinds of responses to scenarios. that either through Commerce Lex or other things that we could all try to pull together and put on one place. And like I said, some of those may need to be updated, but we've got the video of Tyrone and Jenna and some other folks. Bob and I have done a couple of things. So there's some stuff out there but to the group's greater point of over communicating, we're all communicating in different ways at different levels to different people. And to your point of how to make sure we're communicating that directly to businesses, and then they can communicate directly back to us. We could just work more intentionally on some of that. And I think Bob hit on something that's huge. We've been doing these surveys, and we garner a lot of information from them, and we need to do another survey to kind of figure out, do folks want to see that all in one place? Do they want to have access to some of these, back to work, reopen, restart kind of scenarios that we've been shooting and talking about over the past 2 or 3 weeks? And they may want to see it in all kinds of variants. They may want to see the, government back to work. They may want to see restaurants back to work. They may want to look at it all. We may want to create a repository where we have all of that stuff in one place on everybody's site. And then the other thing that I heard everyone say was that, we need to be consistent in our responses back, whether that be email, as Micah said, or being able to get up the phone and in a timely manner get back to a customer or a business. That's going to be essential too. So I think we know that, as far as our feedback to the mayor, we're going to really over communicate and stress that. And we're going to stress, I think as we go back to our own businesses and our own community, we need to think about what have we been involved with in the past 6 to 8 weeks that's been beneficial, and what can other people look at? What have we exchanged on a video front? What podcasts have we been on that we could put out there that people would benefit from? And even if we had to reshoot a couple of Q&As or whatever, or create a new one right after the restart and continue to push that content out, I mean, that's just sitting down, getting on a Zoom call and creating that Q&A. So, and Bob, you can speak to what we're doing every Wednesday at 4:00 at Commerce Lex to kind of get that going. And that's kind of creating that repository of videos for us too.
Yep. Let me add on, I was calling around the nonprofit sector, Vice Mayor Kay, we've been trying to keep in contact with each other so that when there's a need, especially with those in our community that are most vulnerable, that we can provide that need. Jenna and Andy came across a gentleman who had masks that he wanted to donate to some of the more vulnerable organizations. In some of those calls that we made, we learned that many in our medical community have training videos. And one such group I know is looking with legal to make sure that it's something that they can provide and that there's not a liability attached back on it. But the idea has been that we would start putting those, as Ray said, on to our website, other websites, again, as much as we can push this information out. The other wrinkle to that is we've been talking with a lot of companies, some essential businesses, others non, and trying to figure out how can we load in safety plans that they have come up with for their companies. So we could get different types, large, medium, small, then different types of industry and business. And so that's another section we're looking to add. Those are things we're learning through, just some of it's common sense. Some of it is it's finally bubbling to the top, it's to the surface. And some of it, quite frankly, we're learning through the surveys that many people don't know even some of the basic things. They have hunches, they have common sense, but they're not sure and they don't want to do something wrong.
Okay, anybody have anything else they want to add? Because we need to spend probably 15 minutes on economic development. They want to add what our local government can do to help businesses get restarted and up and running.
Well, I would pay a compliment to this whole process, what we've gone through. As we keep saying, there is no blueprint. We're creating it as we go. I think the mayor's task forces, the subgroups, have been incredible. There's a lot of pent up interest by others wanting to also have a say and ask questions. But I think how government has interfaced, I go back to the staff. Wow, they've done a great job on these task forces, setting up Zoom meetings. People are in, people are out, trying to get, minutes taken, now the report. They've been terrific. I just think how public and private has really worked together here that's what really makes us stand out and differentiate ourselves from other places. So Vice Mayor, I hope you'll relay that back on to others on the council, that we really appreciate not just the council members' involvement, but the staff at the city. We're all doing what we have to do, and it's on the job learning as we go, but I think we're doing a lot of the right things.
Well, certainly I'll be happy to do that. And in return, I want to say that I think the burden has fallen more on the chamber than it has on the city. The city is doing everything it can, but I think the business community clearly has been looking to you folks to provide guidance and assistance. For better or worse, they don't think of us as the source for business advice. So I appreciate, and I'll pass on your thoughts. And as I say, in return, I think we really appreciate that Commerce Lexington has stepped up to the plate and done a great job.
Vice Mayor, that's the power of partnership. So that's how it works. That's how it should work.
Sure. Yep. So we want to spend a little bit of time on what does economic development and strategy need from local government going forward. We touched on that briefly last time we got together, but I'd like to get some things on paper. Strategically, specifically economic development and government assistance. So if anybody's got any thoughts, Kevin, if you want to roll out there first.
I'm not trying to divert. I would almost rather hear from Jenna or Bob on kind of what or you even, Ray, because you are a business person, kind of what the thoughts are that on that topic that we could potentially partner with.
I can go a little bit, and I know Andy can follow up on this with the same thing. We're just hearing still a lot on the work share program and unemployment and getting people up, getting their salaries back where they were. So I'm still fielding a lot of that. Cheryl on my team, or on our team, is getting a lot of those calls. And there's no answers to work share right now. So hopefully it's coming, but I think resolving that issue quickly would really help some of these companies that are in that situation, and they are major employers that are going through that. Other things, I mean, for the city's benefit, I know we have to do it strategically and properly, but we've got to get open for you all to revenue. So we want to do everything we can to make sure companies get open for business again in the appropriate time. But how can we best help them? So, I mean, that's the bottom line right now, is how can we do it, get them open, get the city back where it was. But the unemployment insurance thing is a big deal still. So you can furlough people. Certain people are allowed, but that work share program, which is in other states right now, the state is truly working on it. They just aren't there yet. So there's a lot of sensitivity there. And I don't know if Andy, you want to add into it? You're unmute.
I would say, Kevin, I know the mayor has calls with the governor and Micah and Tatum. Anything you all can do to really encourage there to be more communication, because I think the Department of Labor, Tatum, they have approved it. It's just the state is not communicating how that program is going to function, and they're not answering the questions that businesses have as they're trying to plan to see if this works for them or not. So I think any communication that can be done to get clarity on that program that we can communicate out. To Jenna's point, that really is the biggest question from companies that are actually here right now. It's a big problem.
Bob, would it be worth, I know Senator Paul did a call yesterday. I think it was yesterday. Everything's kind of running together.
Yes.
With the group. You've had Congressman Barr do a webinar type of presentation this week. Would it be beneficial to think about trying to get somebody like Josh Benton to do one of those with the business community and provide the detail and update?
Well, we did one, what was it, Andy, a couple of weeks back?
It was at the end of April, and Kevin, it generated so many questions that are still not answered, to be honest with you. So I feel like we could go back to them if they're willing to be more specific and share about the work share program. Like if they're ready to unveil it, that would be great. But that, I mean, I guess we can always ask them and see.
Yeah, I mean, timing's everything, as
Yeah.
everybody knows. And I know there've been bumps and I know there's questions, but I also like to remind folks that I'm talking to that this is unprecedented. I think Josh is working and his team and the governor's folks. We may not agree with everything necessarily sometimes, but they're working as hard and fast as they can. And when you look at unemployment, for example, we've not seen these numbers before because of this. And
And
it's
to
kind
their
of like we don't, in city government, we don't have snow removal equipment for constant 25-inch snows because that would not be practical for the use of taxpayer dollars. They didn't have a system to deal with this because we don't see these kind of numbers until now.
And I think they really are doing the best they can. So, you know, I believe that. It's just
Yeah.
the numbers are overwhelming. So,
And the software that they pointed out to us is they make a lot of changes at a federal and even at the state level. The software probably is not as current, as modern as it needed to be. But again, I go back to what Kevin just said. Nobody ever thought this. I mean, nobody ever thought about a pandemic, this type of scale. So, you know, I'm with Jenna. I think the folks we've had, they're all doing their very best.
And
Yeah,
Ray,
perhaps it's a good time to go back to double back to Josh to see if they are ready to present again. And that would be cutting edge if they had the information our business community needs. Maybe an outreach back to Josh to see timing wise, as Kevin indicated, when is that best time to pull them back in?
or you've got Larry Hayes even, is it time to have an economic development discussion with the business community? You know, we're fortunate. There's not many people as experienced in his field. He's on his second run as he is.
Yeah, we got a great relationship with him.
And then this is something, Ray, that Bob and I've been talking about, and Jenna's been on the part of the conversation, and Andy as well, is since Tatum is sitting here, you know, she brought something to our attention earlier this week out of EDA that maybe we can even potentially put in place to use to continue this conversation so we can plan for the future. And I don't know if Tatum wants to say anything about that. I hate to put her on the spot, but if she wants to say anything about that, and then Bob can kind of fill everybody in on where we are on the conversation.
Yeah, no, I would just chime in to the earlier point. We have a twice weekly call with the administration, so we're happy to ask if there's any updates on the short-term compensation workshare program. DOL did put guidance forth on that, and we got that to the governor's office. But like everybody said, I know they're doing the best they can, but we're happy to just echo that and ask that. The federal agencies are starting to put out guidance about how you can access their programs and things. So EDA has put forth a couple of opportunities, and because of the pandemic, every community in the country can qualify. Nonprofits and local and state governments can qualify. So we sent that opportunity over, and I'm glad you all are going to look into it. Certainly, we're happy to get any guidance or clarification that we can from these federal agencies for you all to know if you're eligible for programs and things. So we're really trying to work as best we can. If there's questions, if there's guidance we need from the federal agencies, to get that to you all in a timely manner. So I'm glad that looks like it might be a good fit.
I got to give Kevin the credit for reaching out to us about a conversation that he and I had years ago in a previous community and region that I was in. One of the things that we were working on was a disaster recovery plan where businesses are plugged in, not those that are federally mandated to be plugged in, because they are, but for the general business community, the large employers, the small. And one of the things that we were able to do was to do a regional plan, because if you just do one county, the people live, 50% of our workforce lives outside of the county, Fayette County. So we did a regional county, and it really brought us together. And what we did was we tried to put together a mitigation plan in advance of a natural disaster. Well, this is a man-made disaster, and we don't have a plan. Again, we don't have a blueprint. So potentially the EDA funds could go to a number of things, but this is one maybe we could look at to help our region. And I think this would help our region come together to build that plan of, it's not if, I hate to say it this way, but it's going to be when we have another type of coronavirus type of disease. And here we're still dealing with this one, but we need to learn the lessons. We need to follow the data. We need to figure out how better we can plug different groups within the community in. It's the social network, it's the daycare centers, as well as it is the big manufacturers, the horse farms. It's all of us. How do we all come together to build that plan to go forward? If we do not, shame on us. And I don't know that many communities will think of doing it this way, but to me, I think this is what one of our strengths are, and that is to pull people together to look ahead. So while we're trying to figure out how to survive today, I think we need to start at least having that general conversation of how do we look ahead for what we need to do to be able to counter a future pandemic or other natural type disaster. Earthquakes, as I understand, can have an impact here. We have a lot of dams, locks and dams around us. Well, what if the water supply gets cut off? You know, it's just things that you don't think about because we just always expect these pieces of infrastructure will work. And then typically business is left out of the general business community, out of the planning. It's not intentional, but this is a lesson we've learned in the past. And so anyway, I just think that's something, whether it's the EDA funds or it's something else, we need to figure out how to pull this together.
So Ray, you know, Bob's comments kind of sum a lot of things up for me. You know, the right now portion of this between government and business is, how do we communicate better with the employers in the community to get them the information that they need to have, whether it's coming out of government or being spread through the chamber and other resources. The second phase in what should be done or what to be considered would be look at avenues like Tatum identified, and how do we plan as maybe the Bluegrass Alliance region on how do we plan for the future? As Bob said, not if, but when something else happens. So yeah, had we had that plan that we're trying to put in place now, you know, would things have been easier going into this model? We would have known where to plug some holes real quick.
Bob, you surmised that perfectly. In business, you always plan for intended consequences, and then you try to deal with unintended consequences. And if we don't learn from this, you know, then we ought to be ashamed. We have to learn from it. We have to plan. So I mean, that's one thing that ought to come out of this group that's going to be huge for our region.
I know that we all. Go ahead, John.
Oh, that seems to be one of the things the site selection consultants and other experts are saying. Going forward, we need the health officials as part of our ED team, so that we can say, just like we say, are the electric rates going into a new business location? How would you mitigate if X happened? Is part of the story going forward. And I think that's going to be part of the expectation for us to be competitive going forward for projects will be this preparedness that we're working on now. So while it feels awkward and disjointed, from my perspective, wow, our local leadership is saying we want people healthy and we want these businesses to reopen. So we're working together on this path. And as you've mentioned, it's unprecedented. So there are frustrations now, but it's going to create some opportunities for us down the road. When you look at all the folks on this call, you've got government, you've got the university, you've got the federal leadership from the United States, and all working together sends a great signal going forward.
And, you know, we all have a heavy heart for those who have died from this. You know, that I can't imagine the pain and anguish, those that have become sick. But if you also look at other metropolitan areas like ours, we have handled this so much better and so well. And again, I go back to, and we can't take for granted, the public-private partnerships. It's just one of those things where when a tragedy hits, when there's a problem, we all roll up our sleeves and we sit down and we figure it out. Again, I know we just think every other community is like that. They're not. I'm on weekly calls with my colleagues nationally, and some are like us and many are not. Where the other thing is, Vice Mayor, you said this, and in the business community, I know we've talked about this, Kevin and Ray, a lot. businesses need consistency, reliability, and clarity of the rules and the guidelines. And that there's nothing that's more difficult for us is if there's a mix and match, it's got to be clarity. And so that's one of the things we've been trying to be very strong about. Let's see here, and then all the other things we get into, all the other standards that it takes to be a healthy, thriving community for economic development, they still exist. But right now, with the coronavirus in front of us, COVID-19, we got to figure out, as we have been talking about, how we thwart it, how we get over it and move on for a better day, and then build that better day.
I had jotted down that the best economic development partnerships, and everybody on this call knows it. It's the triple helix, and everybody has said it. So it's business, government, and academia. And I kind of jotted down that we don't get together as this group very often, and we probably need we don't need a pandemic to pull this group together more regularly and plan things out. And then a couple other things I had jotted down, and I don't know what kind of government infrastructure projects are on the horizon, but anything we could do to accelerate those and get the construction folks, more construction folks working. The sewer projects around UK are going faster than what we were originally told. So that's a good thing. And on the, so I don't know if there's any road projects or other projects that we could maybe speed up the start of and get some of those things rolling. And then just for your information, and I found this pretty interesting, on the innovation side, grant applications out of UK are sky high right now because the researchers are home, and so they're working on those types of applications. And funding thus far is ahead of last year, and last year was our all-time record. So those kinds of things have been, I guess that's one of the blessings that have come out of this. So we just think about, are there other things out there in our community that we can take advantage of during this period of time?
Ray, that might be a good recommendation out of this. I agree with everything George just said, but should a group like this not have a conversation more often outside of a pandemic?
It's a huge takeaway. Quinn, how are we on time?
We're doing okay on time. We don't have another meeting until 1, so we're pretty flexible right now.
Good. So everybody's free till 1.
From our perspective, my perspective anyway, Kev, I don't know about everybody else, but
no, a lot of good takeaways. And I've written down, and I know Quinn has taken notes, and Craig, and we've tried to take down everything everyone's saying. Bob, your ideas, we've been talking about this regional coming together as a region for a while, and this gives us one huge reason to do it and really push. And Daryl, your great idea about bringing the health aspect to it. We need a supply chain aspect to it as well.
And I think building on what George just said, there's a new ED opportunity. We've got a major research university here. Everybody's talking about health issues. There may be some business spinoffs, some targets that we need to develop that we have not really thought about in the past.
And that's something we have to put a lot of thought into. And that Kevin's point, that's why we need to get together more often. I would expect that there's going to be spinoffs as a result of just COVID-19, but having UK here, if we can get involved from a business front on some of those spinoffs, that would be an excellent thing.
Yeah, Ian McClure would have to give you whatever information he's allowed to give, but he has made the comment to me that they've had several disclosures for inventions specific to various research being done around the virus.
I think Jenna, from the technology aspect, I've heard a lot of folks that are going to be investing, some of our local tech people, into technology and apps and other things too. There seems to be a lot of buzz around that for things to help with COVID-19 and these types of things going forward. So there's probably a lot of conversations inside of a lot of sectors that we could be getting involved in, so we at least have firsthand knowledge and that we can actually take advantage of some of those opportunities and help those companies as they explore their business plans and their ideas.
And Ray, one other I'd like to mention, and the vice mayor was the lead on this a few years back, and I was glad to, in some ways, small role, help him. Don't forget about the ag economy. We hired somebody to totally focus on that a few years back now, and she's done that on a regional basis, and I think it's very beneficial to whether it's the school system or the local restaurants or even others.
Good point.
Let me, if I can, thank you, Kevin, for bringing that up. But kind of longer range, I think there are significant issues about food security that this pandemic has made obvious. And we have tried to get ahead of that a little bit, but I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think it hits both parts of what we've been talking about. It does talk about food security and people being comfortable about the food they eat, but it's also there's a huge upside for the local ag economy. 95% of the food we eat comes from someplace else, either directly or indirectly, and we have the capacity to do a whole lot more. So we will be focusing more on that. Also, if I can, let me loop back to the overriding message. I think as someone in government, it's hard to say to the public, we're doing everything we can. But I think that has to be a part of the message. And it's already been spoken to, but this is not just unusual, but unprecedented and unforeseeable and every other adjective you can think about. So I think we need to basically be conveying as much as we can that at all levels of government, people are really working harder than they ever have, and they're trying to do their best and making progress. So people need to hear that, and I think we need to also advocate for some patience. And again, from the inside, people from the general community doesn't want to hear patience. They want to hear, get it done. I want an answer. I need an answer now. And some of that is simply not possible. And I think we have to be clear about what we can and cannot do. You know, it's tricky, but I think that's a part of what we need to do. The other thing I would say is that, from my perspective anyway, the message, a part of the message needs to be, we're working on getting open and staying open. We don't want to do anything that's foolish. We don't want to make a misstep and open and then get a spike and then have to say to people, we're closing down again. So it's not simply getting open as soon as possible. It's getting open as soon as possible in a way that we will continue to stay open, because that's the only thing that's going to stabilize. Well, it's not going to stabilize in the short term. We need to do that. That's what's going to help the economy. Thank you.
That's good. One other thing, Bob, I think we need to be considering is we're going to have all kinds of employment shifts. Not saying that we're going to have a lot of businesses contract fully, but their structures may change and the hiring will move to different, there may be more hiring in the ag sector. I know from Fayette County Schools, there's one of the scenarios that we're looking at on a start that will require us to hire 1,000 more people. So there are some shifts in employment that is an unintended consequence of this that we need to catalog and pay attention to so we can give supports to it. But there's going to be a shift, people moving as we figure out which businesses and sectors kind of accelerate coming out of this faster than other sectors.
Yeah. We're going to need to look ahead and try to stay as far ahead of technology as far as the applications for it and what that means for us. It's going to affect every aspect of our economy, from airline to hotel to basic consumer walking in the door. How do we survive all that? How do we adapt? We'll figure out how to survive, but we're going to have to adapt. And there will be shifts in just about everything that we can think of. I do know that Betsy and the Business and Education Network, Daryl, is focusing on pulling together the data of what the data is telling us about our workforce. And that's very critical information we need to go forward with. So
we're talking about going ahead and advancing some work that we started on with some research looking at the region, but that this matchmaking ability to bring back employers and employees and opportunities going forward is going to be more critical than we thought it was in the late tight labor market. We're still going to have those tight labor market shortages, but with lots of folks scrambling to see where those new opportunities are going to be. Us, the business community, Commerce Lexington being the interface to help businesses sync up with new opportunities with employees is going to be an excellent opportunity.
Yeah. And I do want to go back. I'd be remiss, George, and thank you for saying this. Our relationship with the city, the university, and the private sector, Commerce Lexington, we were recognized internationally. You know, you got to get away 50 miles away from home before you're considered an expert in anything. But we got recognized. It's something that you would just think every community does, but we're all co-located. We also have offices. You have them on your campus. We have our building, and then the city, right, you know, within a couple blocks, we're all right there together. We take that for granted, but we shouldn't, because that's something that, though we're seamless to the customer, it's just something we can, and we do, we build on it constantly. I know Jenna's plugged in all the time with you, George, and others, and Kevin. This is what's worked really well to help advance us at a difficult time.
So I've got a lot of notes. I know Quinn and Craig probably have a lot of notes as well. We probably
I don't want to add to your notes, but I was on a webinar with listening to Mayor Gordon yesterday, and Judge Buchanan and Mayor Keck from Somerset yesterday, and the whole issue of liability came up from a government standpoint and a business standpoint going forward. And I know that has not come up today, but that came up in that conversation yesterday.
We've been having that with our federal folks, with Micah and Tatum. We've asked Congressman Barr, and we've had those questions on where we're at on some of those liability issues. And that's an overriding factor that as Vice Mayor Kay said, we want to open and stay open and safely open. We want people first to be safe and businesses to be safe and feel safe. But an overriding factor that a lot of them have the questions of where do they fall on a liability scale. That's a good point, Darryl.
That is a big issue, and it growing. Gas companies now start to open up.
Anybody have any other things that we that need to bubble to the top, or we need to briefly talk about before we adjourn? Anything else we need to get down on paper?
So if I can chime in real quick, what some of the subcommittees have been doing is they've been sort of collectively empowering the chair to work with staff after their last meeting to put together any final recommendations that would be forwarded along. And with the understanding that those recommendations would be shared with all of the subcommittee members at some point in the near future. So I just wanted to put that out there. That's what I'm seeing commonly in the other subcommittees, and it seems like it would be appropriate here.
Yeah, unless anybody has any objection, I think we'll work the same process, Craig, unless we have an objection there. Okay. Any closing remarks from anybody?
Thank you, Ray, for chairing, and thank you everyone for participating.
Thanks, Ray.
No, I'd like to say thanks for everyone for taking your time. You know, time is precious at this point. Thank you for all of your service. As George and others have said on this call, this component that we have, the makeup of this group, has made Lexington very special and this region very special as we responded to COVID-19. There are more challenges ahead. As Vice Mayor Kay says, there's definitely more challenges ahead. And as Bob said, we will adapt to those challenges and we will succeed if we take full measure of, you know, intended and unintended consequences, and we stay close and committed, as Kevin said, and we continue to gather as a group and share best practices and over communicate all the things that we need to over communicate for all of us to be successful. I think we all want to see Lexington and the region do well. We're coming from a right place. So I thank you for your time. I'll work with the staff to put some of this stuff together and get it forwarded to you. And I hope to reach back to the same group, as Kevin said, at some point and continue this discussion, and just to make sure that we're all working together. And really, you know, as Bob said, we have to get together after this is over and try to figure out what our plans are going forward if we ever have an incident like this again. So thank you for everyone's time. You guys have a great day and a great weekend. And we are adjourned. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank you all so much.
Bye.